Welcome in to the post-game reaction podcast, the Go 24/7 edition. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Glen West, where LSU winners in the Texas Bowl 44-31 against Baylor. Glenn, let's kind of start off with, look, you can take a look at this. You could be frustrated with the defense. It kind of follows suit with what we saw at times this season. Tackling needs to be better. Bend, don't break. But there were some positive things that came out of it. Let's start defensively here. I mean, you give up 507 yards. One of the other media members was joking, kind of felt like an old-school Big 12 football game. But just what was your assessment of this team's grit, ability to get off the field on fourth downs, too?
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest key that I had, just in terms of, it wasn't a great defensive performance, like in terms of playing between the 20s. But when LSU needed to get off the field, they got off the field. 1 for 5, I believe Baylor was on fourth down. 5 for 12 on third down. So they did their job on the late downs in terms of getting off the field and giving the ball back to the offense. I thought, look, this game had everything. It had kickoff returns for touchdowns. It had really mind-boggling turnovers. It had an unfortunate injury to Whit Weeks. I mean, it had just so many different layers to it, and you see the final score there, 44-31, and I think the teams combined for close to 1,000 yards when you factor in LSU's performance tonight as well offensively. First half I thought was about as great an executed first half as LSU's had all season. They were really clicking there, especially in the early going with Nussmeier in the passing game. Offensive line I thought held up extremely well in this game as well. So I think there were there were more good than bad to take away from this game, and certainly would have liked to have seen the defense maybe not surrender as many yards, but they were able to bend and not break, and they didn't give up a whole ton of touchdowns and that thing. So overall, I thought it was a really good, clean win for LSU to kind of get that start to 2025. That was something that Brian Kelly and the players told us after this game, that they felt like going in, this could be their start to 2025, and we know how LSU has gone in openers here over the last several years.
They're going to treat this as the opener.
So they're going to treat this as the opener. So if you follow that basic of logic, then LSU's off to a grand start in 2025, and when you factor in what they're going to be bringing in this offseason and kind of the direction I think they think this program's going in. So lots of good to take away in terms of the returning pieces, and I thought a lot of the young guys stepped up as well, which we can get into as we go on.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and just kind of another takeaway from on-the-field stuff. Look, I mean, you get a win, right? And that's what this is. And I think we're kind of in this era where people, some group of people say bowl games are meaningless. Other people say they mean a lot. And I think inside that building, whether they're going to say it publicly or not, it does matter. This did matter. It mattered for the development of some of those younger players. Devon Keys looked really, really good today. It mattered for the development of guys that, not just young players, Chris Hilton, and kind of having a game that he can say, look, here is what happens when I'm healthy and things work and click. So just from an on-the-field perspective, you're right. It wasn't all pretty. Bowl games are crazy. That's why we love Bowl Mania. That's why we come, and enjoy these games. But in all seriousness, it feels like it's a building block. And I think a lot of fans entered this season, and Brian Kelly said in the postgame that he didn't want to use the word disappointing. He felt like it was a young team, and really kind of maybe what they thought inside the building would happen happened. They had some deficiencies. They had young players that were going to have to go through the bumps and bruises of being young guys, and that happened, and it led to a 9-4 finish. Now let's talk a little bit about those young players. I mentioned Devon Keys, Trades Green, which I think we have been begging to see more of him after that touchdown against Ole Miss he had. There's many more down the line that felt like, hey, guys were brought in from the portal, high school guys are coming in, but don't forget about us, guys in that 2024 class that really feel like they can make a mark on this upcoming next season. Yeah,
that was the breakout game I think we were waiting for Trades to have in his true freshman year, and I think a reason he probably didn't have it was because he was sitting behind Mason Taylor for 13 games, and Mason Taylor is a really good player, going to be probably a second round, third round kind of draft pick. So they really spent the last 3 or 4 weeks leaning into Trades in that Mason Taylor role, and Brian Kelly said it after the game. He was proud of him. I would probably venture to guess that of the 16 minutes that Brian Kelly was at the podium after the game, I would say a third of it was spent talking about Trades Green because of how much they feel like this game was great for him in terms of his development, how much this time meant to him in terms of learning the tight end position, being put in those positions to inline block and kind of get muddied up a little bit, kind of get beaten up a little bit. He said there were probably some nights where Green was falling asleep by 6:30, 7 o'clock because of how much he was getting beaten up. But that's the kind of the the role that LSU needs him to play next year.
Yeah.
And you saw that there with the 2 red zone touchdowns, how valuable that's going to be for LSU's offense next year, and how much Nussmeier trusts him. I mean, all 5 of his catches came with 3rd and 4th down implications, or also a touchdown that was involved. So he's going to be a very valued asset next year for LSU offensively. And then another group that I think we should mention here a little bit is the offensive line. I mean, whether it's Tyree Adams at left tackle, you had Cohen Eccles in there a lot at guard, Paul Mubanga in a lot at guard. They didn't give up a sack in this game, or maybe they gave up 1 sack right at the very end.
I do want to say Baylor had their guys in. This wasn't a second-team Baylor unit that was playing. This was 21 out of 22 starters for Baylor playing today.
So very encouraging for those young players to get this kind of valuable experience, to go into this offseason with. And I think, honestly, it probably gives a guy like Nussmeier a lot more confidence in what they can maybe get away with next year in terms of how they play offensively. So certainly you're going to be welcoming them in, the 13 transfer players, the 20-some-odd players you signed in the high school class. There's going to be some turnover on this roster, but I think if you walk away from this game with anything, it's that they have some pretty good dudes returning as well. So they're going to be able to supplement this roster, I think, with the right kind of talent to where they think they can be in that playoff picture next year and make a run.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that they are pleased with how this season ended, but it is something where you win your final 3 games, because a lot of teams, and I really hope people can understand this, they would have folded after the Florida game and would have packed it in. You would have seen some veterans. If the culture wasn't good, you would have seen some veterans say, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to risk injury. Nope, Braden Swinson, who probably made himself into a day 1, borderline day 2 pick this year, he's out there playing in a bowl game, so don't tell me bowl games don't mean anything to all these guys. And then just kind of talk about Whit Weeks. The good news is that all indications point to this is more of a bone injury, as he talks about the dislocated ankle, rather than a soft tissue injury. No tear, anything like that. If that is indeed true, it sounds like Whit is going to have surgery fairly soon. Kelly didn't want to put a timetable on it, but they feel like, hey, maybe spring practice we can start to see him. Glenn, first off, talk about the big sigh of relief LSU fans should have for that. And then just, obviously, we got the chance to talk to West. And I don't know. I mean, maybe we didn't get to hear the full scope of it, but it just really shows me what's really going on inside that building and how much they care about number 40 when the whole sideline empties to go support him.
Yeah, look, West was getting emotional at the very end of his press conference today with the media, talking about how much it meant to him that the entire team went over to say hi to his brother and kind of wish him the best and in that moment, which is obviously very scary for him and his entire family. So look, you mentioned it there. Sounds like Brian Kelly said after the game it's a dislocated ankle. He's going to have surgery here very, very, very soon, and the hope is that they can get him back around spring ball. So that's best case scenario for Whit. I did write in my keys to the game. The very last one was just get out of there healthy. So you don't like to see something like that happen, but he should still have a good portion of this offseason where he feels right and feels healthy enough to maybe get some of the work done in this third offseason that he really wants to be the kind of all-SEC, possibly all-American type linebacker that LSU's been missing for the last couple of years. And so you tailor that with what you got coming back with Harold Perkins, with a young player like Devon Keys. You got West Weeks, of course. You got a number of these young freshmen that are going to be coming up the pike here pretty soon. So I think LSU looks pretty good in their front 7 right now in terms of the depth, particularly at linebacker. You can certainly look up front in that defensive line, and you point to a number of guys, whether it's McKinley or Ahmad Bro. There's going to be some players here that LSU's going to be able to bring in out of the portal that should be able to help supplement that group as well. So very excited about kind of the direction that this defense is going in. But to have that moment there where I think the entire team was there, it shows just kind of what the leadership is like with Whit and how much he's maybe taken on over the last several weeks as LSU's kind of leaned into this new era without some of the older guys that were leading this team this year.
No pun intended, right? Over the last several weeks with Whit Weeks.
Yeah,
there you go.
There's a lot of weeks there.
Well, they've turned the scoreboards off here, so I believe the final score was 44-31. 13-point victory there for LSU. Things they need to clean up. Special teams. Look, I mean, you got to go hire a tight ends coach with Slade Nagel now. I don't think he was in the building, but he's in the city now, obviously at the University of Houston. So some things and storylines to keep track of. And also Brian Kelly kind of hinted at they may not be done in the portal as you get ready. Remember, folks, when teams are eliminated, and by the time you're watching this or listening to this, these next 4 teams that are eliminated, there's 5-day window for those guys to hit the portal. And I guarantee you there's some big boards across the country, and obviously with LSU going forward, man, It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a great I wouldn't say it's been a great. It's been
I've enjoyed the 2024
aggressively
season.
average season. There's been some highs and some lows. But look, I think you can look at it kind of just putting a pin on just the whole calendar year. This team is, I think, taking the right steps. And this wasn't the outcome that I think a lot of people had hoped for in year 3 with Brian Kelly and just kind of the stigma that was around him as a coach before he got to LSU. But we're also in a different world here.
Yeah.
We're in a different world of where you can still be a pretty well-coached team and not get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And
so many factors.
I think the main factor here and what we've seen here over the last couple of weeks, LSU's going to be aggressive going forward and trying to find and build the best roster possible. We'll see if they add another offensive line. We'll see if they add a safety or two to this mix as well. But there's a good as you hear there, the whistle there. There's some good positive vibes, I think, right now with the way this team has been built over the last month. And this was just a nice little cherry on top of the 2024 season to kind of get out of here with a win and build some momentum here as you go into year 4, which is going to be a pretty big one here in Baton Rouge in the Brian Kelly era.
It is. The chase for one of those top 12 spots in the playoff will commence now. The work starts now. And so for the final time in 2024, not just because of the season, but literally as we record this here on New Year's Eve, we say thank you for tuning in all season long. And obviously we're going to have more great content coming on the YouTube channel, Go 24/7. Make sure you get that subscription as well. We ring in the new year. 2025 is here. Recruiting. Glenn, what are we, under 45 days from the start of baseball season? I mean, we're right around the corner.
We're just a few weeks away from spring ball starting here.
SEC hoops action going to start for both men and women. So
Trades Green will be on the roster next week for men's basketball. So.
Source. Trades Green.
Trades Green. We asked him as he was walking off the field tonight, and look, he's going to be feeling pretty good about himself. I think walking into that basketball gym next week. So we'll see if he can't shake off some cobwebs and maybe help Matt McMahon and company get some big wins in conference play as well.
It's all a great reason for you to hang out over with us at Go 24/7. We appreciate you. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and we'll catch you next time. I guess another football one will be spring practice, or maybe in Clemson, South Carolina in August, here on the Go 24/7 Instant Reaction Podcast.